The Western did not disappear in the 1960s and 70s. It fractured. Studios lost faith, budgets shrank, audiences drifted. What remained were strange, overlooked films that dared to challenge the myths of the frontier. These Westerns were quieter, darker, and often more honest than the classics that came before them. These are 15 forgotten Westerns from the 60s and 70s you can stream for free. This is Part 2, number 15, Ride in the Whirlwind. 1966. Ride in the Whirlwind is a Western about how quickly innocence becomes a death sentence. Directed by and starring Monty Hellman alongside Jack Nicholson, the film follows three cowboys who make a single bad decision by sharing shelter with outlaws. When the law arrives, there are no questions, only assumptions, and assumptions are enough to justify violence. What makes the film devastating is its refusal to allow heroism to intervene. These men do nothing wrong. They do not resist. They do not draw first. None of it matters. Once labeled guilty, the frontier has no mechanism for mercy. The posse is not portrayed as evil caricatures. They are ordinary men convinced they are doing the right thing. That conviction is the most frightening part. Justice is reduced to momentum. Released quietly in the mid-60s, the film barely registered with audiences raised on moral clarity. It was too bleak, too modern, too unforgiving. Streaming freely today, Ride in the Whirlwind feels brutally relevant. A Western that understands how quickly society chooses order over truth, and how easily good men are erased when fear takes control. Number 14. The Hunting Party, 1971. The Hunting Party is a Western that treats revenge as a contagious disease. Starring Gene Hackman and Oliver Reed, the film follows a posse pursuing a man accused of assault. What begins as justice rapidly mutates into obsession. Civility erodes. Cruelty becomes sport. Hackman's performance is especially unsettling. His lawman is articulate, principled, and terrifyingly calm. He believes completely in his righteousness. That belief allows him to justify escalating brutality without hesitation. The film strips away the fantasy of lawful pursuit. The chase becomes ritualized violence where the hunt matters more than the crime. By the end, survival itself feels incidental. Released during the height of revisionist Westerns, the film was overshadowed by flashier, more nihilistic titles. Its restraint worked against it. Streaming freely today, The Hunting Party lands with disturbing clarity. It understands that the frontier did not create monsters. It gave ordinary men permission to become them. Number 13. The Good Guys and the Bad Guys, 1969. This film arrived at the precise moment the Western was losing its moral certainty. Starring Robert Mitchum, The Good Guys and the Bad Guys deliberately blurs the lines between hero, outlaw, and opportunist. Alliances shift constantly. Loyalty is temporary. Survival is the only principle anyone truly respects. Mitchum plays a weary gunman, navigating a landscape where ideals no longer apply. Every character is compromised. Every deal carries consequences. The title promises simplicity. The film delivers moral exhaustion. Audiences in 1969 were not prepared for a Western this cynical. Released during a cultural reckoning, the film quietly slipped through the cracks. Today, it feels prophetic. The frontier is no longer a place of justice. It is a marketplace of desperation. Streaming freely now, the film stands as one of the earliest signals that the Western was evolving into something darker, more modern, and far less comforting. Number 12. The Grand Duel, 1972. By the early 70s, the spaghetti Western had become a genre of excess. The Grand Duel chose restraint. Directed by Giancarlo Santi, a former assistant to Sergio Leone, the film follows a mysterious gunman escorting a falsely accused young man toward a trial he may never survive. What unfolds is not a parade of gunfights, but a slow tightening of fate. The violence arrives sparingly, but with consequence. Every stare, every silence carries weight. Ennio Morricone's score does not overwhelm the film. It haunts it. This is a Western built on tension rather than spectacle. At its core, the film is about justice delayed and manipulated by power. Courts are corrupt. Sheriffs are compromised. The only truth left is what a man is willing to stand for when the law has failed. Overshadowed by louder, bloodier westerns of the era, the grand duel slipped quietly into obscurity. Streaming freely today, it plays like a bridge between classic myth and modern cynicism. A western that understands the duel is never really between two men. It is between truth and time. Number 11. Yuma, 1971. Yuma is a western built almost entirely on moral pressure. Set largely within a single frontier town, the film traps its characters in a web of legal maneuvering, personal grudges, and unspoken violence. There is little movement, and that is the point. No one can escape the consequences waiting for them. The story centers on a man accused of murder while the town debates whether justice is possible or convenient. Every conversation is a negotiation, every silence a verdict. Unlike traditional westerns, the gun is not the ultimate authority here. Reputation is, fear is. Community judgment replaces frontier law and exposes how easily justice can be corrupted by self-interest. Released quietly and barely marketed, Yuma vanished almost immediately. It lacked stars, spectacle, and optimism. What it offered instead was discomfort. Streaming freely today, it feels unsettlingly modern. A reminder that the most dangerous place in the West was never the open range. It was the town square. Number 10. The Gun and the Pulpit, 1974. Few westerns confront faith and violence as directly as The Gun and the Pulpit. Starring Marjoe Gortner, the film follows a preacher forced to confront brutal frontier realities when his pacifist beliefs collide with lawlessness. Unlike classic Western heroes, he does not arrive ready to fight. He arrives unprepared. The film questions whether moral purity can survive in a world built on force. Every attempt at peace is met with bloodshed. Every refusal to act carries a cost. The gun and the pulpit are not opposites here. They are competing necessities. Released during a decade defined by distrust in institutions, the film resonated with almost no one at the time. Audiences wanted certainty. This film offered none. Today, its ambiguity feels purposeful. Streaming freely now, it stands as a rare Western willing to admit that righteousness does not guarantee survival. Sometimes belief must bleed before it learns. Number 9. A Man Called Horse, 1970. Few westerns of the era were as confrontational as A Man Called Horse. It did not romanticize the frontier, it interrogated it. Starring Richard Harris, the film follows an English aristocrat captured by a Sioux tribe and forced to survive as a slave before earning acceptance. What shocked audiences was not the premise, but the refusal to soften the experience. Rituals are brutal. Survival is humiliating. Assimilation is earned through pain rather than sympathy. The film strips away the comforting fantasy that civilization arrives cleanly. Culture is not exchanged politely. It collides. The Western hero here is not triumphant. He is broken down, rebuilt, and permanently altered. Released at the dawn of the 70s, the film faced censorship controversy and critical discomfort. Many dismissed it as exploitative. Others quietly recognized its honesty. Streaming freely today, it feels raw, unapologetic, and historically important. It does not ask the audience to feel superior. It asks them to endure. Number 8. They Call Me Trinity, 1970. At a time when westerns were turning grim, They Call Me Trinity did something radical. It laughed. Starring Terence Hill, the film presents a frontier hero who survives not through intimidation, but indifference. Trinity is lazy, irreverent, and almost accidentally lethal. Violence is undercut by comedy and bravado by mockery. What made the film revolutionary was not its humor, but its timing. Audiences were exhausted by cynicism. This film gave them permission to enjoy the genre again, without pretending it was sacred. Critics initially dismissed it as disposable. Its success proved otherwise. It opened the door for an entire wave of comedic westerns that treated the myth with affection rather than reverence. Streaming freely now, the film plays as both parody and preservation. It understands the Western well enough to poke fun at it, and that understanding saved the genre from total extinction. Number 7. The Undefeated, 1969. Released at the end of the 60s, The Undefeated feels like a Western refusing to surrender its identity. Starring John Wayne and Rock Hudson, the film explores post-Civil War reconciliation through reluctant cooperation rather than triumph. Former enemies must survive together in hostile territory where the war is ended, but the wounds have not healed. What sets the film apart is its exhaustion. These men are tired of fighting. Victory offers no clarity. Honor feels outdated. The frontier no longer cares which side anyone was on. Overshadowed by flashier revisionist westerns, the film was quietly set aside. Its sincerity was mistaken for simplicity. Streaming freely today, it plays as one of the last studio westerns trying to bridge the old myth with a changing world. Not angry, not ironic, just weary. Number 6. Minnesota Clay, 1964. Minnesota Clay feels like a spaghetti western that escaped the noise and bloodshed dominating the genre and chose something colder, something crueler. Starring Cameron Mitchell, the film follows a legendary gunman returning home after years in prison, only to discover he is slowly going blind. His reputation still terrifies everyone around him. His body is already betraying him. The duel he fears most is not with another outlaw, but with time itself. What makes the film so unsettling is its restraint. Violence is implied more than shown. Fear spreads through whispered stories rather than gunfire. The townspeople believe in the myth of Minnesota Clay more than the man himself. Blindness becomes a metaphor for the Western hero losing relevance in a world that no longer needs him. The frontier does not reward past glory. It devours it. Overshadowed by louder spaghetti westerns, Minnesota Clay slipped quietly into obscurity. Streaming freely today, it feels remarkably modern, a western about decline, inevitability, and the cost of being remembered for violence alone. Number 5. Four Fast Guns, 1960. Released at the very start of the 60s, Four Fast Guns already feels like a genre in retreat. Directed by William J. Hull Jr., the film centers on a lawman tasked with cleaning up a violent town while navigating personal relationships that complicate every decision. It carries the surface structure of a classic Western, but beneath it lies exhaustion. The hero is not confident. The townspeople are not grateful. Authority feels temporary and fragile. Every attempt at order is met with resentment rather than respect. What makes the film fascinating is its tone. There is no triumph in restoring law, only relief that the violence has paused. The frontier feels small, confined, and tired. Ignored upon release and quickly forgotten, Four Fast Guns lacks spectacle but gains intimacy. Streaming freely today, it plays like a quiet warning. The Western was already questioning itself long before the revisionists arrived. This film heard the genre losing its voice and chose to whisper instead. Number 4. The Last Hard Men, 1976. By the time The Last Hard Men arrived, the Western was almost entirely dismantled. Starring Charlton Heston and James Coburn, The film pits two aging men against each other in a final reckoning, fueled by revenge rather than justice. There is no romance here, no honor, only bitterness that has survived longer than youth. Coburn's outlaw is vicious and unrepentant. Heston's lawman is rigid, consumed by the need for closure. Neither represents the future. Both are relics refusing to disappear quietly. The film's violence is abrupt and ugly. Its landscapes feel empty rather than expansive. Civilization is closing in, and neither man belongs within it. Released with little fanfare, the last hard men vanished quickly, dismissed as too bleak, too late. Streaming freely now, it feels like the Western's last honest argument. Not about heroes, about what happens when legends refuse to die. Number 3, Chatto's Land, 1972. Chatto's Land arrived like a bruise on the genre. It refused romance, it rejected comfort, and it made violence feel exhausting rather than exciting. Starring Charles Bronson as a half-Apache man hunted by a posse of white townsmen, the film flips the traditional Western pursuit narrative. The hunters become the villains. The land itself turns hostile against them. The frontier is no longer neutral ground. It chooses sides. What distinguishes the film is its patience. Death does not arrive heroically. It arrives suddenly, brutally, and without ceremony. The posse unravels not because of skill, but because of arrogance and fear. Civilization proves useless once stripped of authority. Released during a period of cultural reckoning, the film made audiences uneasy. It offered no noble lawmen and no clean moral exits. That discomfort helped bury it. Streaming freely today, Chatto's Land feels confrontational and unflinching. A Western that understands the land, remembers everything, and forgives nothing. Number 2, Hannie Calder, 1971. Few Westerns of the era were as openly confrontational as Hannie Calder. Starring Raquel Welch, the film centers on a woman brutalized by outlaws who trains with a former gunman to hunt them down. This is not a revenge fantasy built on empowerment slogans. It is a grim procedural of trauma turned into resolve. The film refuses to glamorize violence. Welch's transformation is painful, humiliating, and incomplete. Victory does not heal her. It merely allows her to continue. Released at a time when Western audiences were still uncomfortable with female vengeance, the film was dismissed and misunderstood. Critics labeled it exploitative while ignoring its emotional brutality. Viewed today, it feels radical. Streaming freely. Now Hannie Calder stands as one of the earliest Westerns to admit that justice does not restore innocence. It only balances the scales enough to keep breathing. Number 1, Keoma, 1976. If there is a Western that feels like the genre collapsing inward on itself, it is Keoma. Starring Franco Nero, the film follows a half-native gunfighter returning to a plague-ridden town ruled by cruelty, betrayal, and decay. The world is ending here, not metaphorically, spiritually. The West has rotted. The film abandons realism in favor of nightmare imagery and haunting music. Dialogue feels prophetic. Violence feels ritualistic. The frontier is no longer a place to conquer. It is a place to survive long enough to escape. Ignored upon release, Keoma was too strange, too bleak, and too late. That rejection preserved it. Streaming freely today, it feels like a requiem, not just for the Western, but for the myths that once made it possible. These Westerns were not forgotten because they failed. They were forgotten because they arrived when audiences no longer wanted honesty. Today, they survive online, waiting quietly. No hype, no nostalgia, just stories that refuse to lie about the frontier. If you want more, lost Westerns buried between eras, say the word.